Comic Book Savant, episode 422. Welcome back to the Comic Book Savant podcast. I'm your host, James Harris. This episode, we're going to be doing a spoiler-filled review for the new DC Films movie Shazam. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, you might want to go over to youtube.com/Comic Book Savant to see a non-spoiler review of the movie, but I don't want to spoil anything for you. So if you're at this point, stop the podcast now, come back after you've seen the movie, so I don't ruin anything for you. For those of you that have seen the movie or don't care about if they see the movie or not and don't care about spoilers, then proceed at your own risk. With all that being said and out of the way, before I get into the movie, I just want to give a shout out to my friends over at the Comics Podcast Network. You can find them over at comicspodcast.com. If you like what I do here and you're looking for more comic book related podcasts to listen to, take a moment to go over to the Comics Podcast Network. There are literally hundreds of different podcasts listed there. You can find anything from a single person podcast like myself to a two-man team or two-person team to a roundtable discussion. You can find podcasts related to a particular publisher, character, or superhero team. So you have a lot of different options to pick and choose from. So if you have a moment, definitely stop by the Comics Podcast Network. Check out some of the other podcasters that are there, and reach out to them and let them know that you enjoy their work. If you try someone out and you find a new podcast that you like. Now, with all that being said, the topic of conversation for this podcast is Shazam, which is directed by David F. Sandberg. He's known. This is only, I think, his second feature release. He did a horror movie a couple of years back called Lights Out. This is his second directorial feature. Then the script was written by Henry Gayden and Darren Lemke. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And the breakdown is as follows. We all have a superhero inside of us. It just takes a bit of magic to bring it out. In Billy Batson's case, by shouting out the word Shazam, this streetwise 14-year-old foster kid can turn into an adult superhero, Shazam. And the main cast of characters is Zachary Levi as Shazam. We have Mark Strong as Dr. Thaddeus Savannah. We have Jaimin Hanzu as the Wizard Shazam. Jack Dylan Grazer as Freddie Freeman. And Asher Angel as Billy Batson. And I have to say, I was really anticipating this movie. I don't know a lot about Shazam overall as a character. When I was a kid growing up in the late 70s, early 80s, it was reruns of like the Shazam Hour where it was a live action TV show, really kind of hokey. I think it was Shazam at ISIS Power Hour or something like that. And I was vaguely familiar with that. I knew it was like a faucet character that DC obtained the rights to. Most memorable when I think of Shazam or Captain Marvel, as he was first known as, was when I first really started getting heavy into DC Comics. One of the first stories that kind of drew me back in was Kingdom Come, and he plays a pivotal part in Kingdom Come. But that was Elseworld story, and but he wasn't used a ton or spotlighted a ton in main continuity. So just really until word came out of this movie, they used him here and there on like Justice League and Justice League Unlimited and a couple of episodes and things like that here and there. So I was he's a character that I'm not nearly as versed in as, say, a Spider-Man or a Batman or some of those other type of characters that are, have more of a spotlight on them. But so I was curious. I liked the whole approach from what I saw in the trailers. A lot of the movie was hidden. You just kind of kept seeing a lot of the transformation stuff over and over again, a little bit of Dr. Savannah. So I didn't know what to expect going in, but I was really excited about the possibility of the movie. And I have to say, for me personally, I was disappointed. A lot of people got a chance to see this movie early. They did a ton of advanced screenings for the movie. Again, for me, I wasn't able to go until opening weekend to see the movie. And it's not a bad movie. It's not a great movie. I wouldn't even say it's a good movie. It's a solid movie. I don't knock it. I don't hate it. But I feel like I just wasn't the target demographic. I know, and it's a funny thing, and I've talked about this fact in numerous movie reviews that I've done, a lot more so in the past year or so. I remember I really, came to this realization around the time Guardians 2 came out, and I did a review that, certain movies now I realize, as though I'm a longtime comic fan and everything that I do, that I'm not the target for every comic book movie that comes out. And it's becoming more and more evident as we're getting more and more movies hitting the theaters month after month, year after year, that not everything's going to be targeted to my wheelhouse. Though, which is weird, which it kind of pulled me in, and they touched on a lot of things as far as, they played up a lot of the movies from the 80s, like The Goonies and Big, stuff that was associated with my childhood or earlier, preteen, teen years, that, the buzzwords that were used in the movie being described in the advertising. And, going into the experience of the movie, I was kind of, I was like really like revved up. I have to say I was more excited about this movie because it was a movie that I talked about like in the summer especially around Comic-Con, when stuff came out for this and things came out for Aquaman. I had negative reaction to Aquaman, as you recall, when I talked about that stuff in those Comic-Con, when those trailers hit from San Diego Comic-Con. I was like, oh, I'm not really feeling Aquaman, and I had like little to no expectations when I went to see Aquaman, but really enjoyed the movie for what it was, because it was a throwback to my early adulthood and my later teens, where I was like that 80s and early 90s action film genre. So it fed into that, my adolescence, and it was nostalgic in a way. Was it the best movie? No, but it hit a sweet spot for me that made me connect to it in a certain way. And I felt like maybe this movie would have done the same thing, but it did the complete opposite. And you could tell by the reactions of the it was a lot of families, big groups of family or big groups of like friends, and it was really skewed. Things that I thought would hit me a certain way just didn't land as I thought, and there's nothing wrong with that. It just colors the way I feel for the movie. But anytime I do these reviews, I'll give you my personal insight, but then I'll give you my overall opinion, because our opinions can differ. That's what makes us a great community of comic book fans, that you might, just because it might be something you love when you read or something you watch, I might not feel the same way. So I'm not going to try to sway you to feel the way I feel. I'll just give you the reasonings why I feel the way I feel, and give you reasons on why you might like it. That's why I try to be as unbiased as possible whenever I do these reviews, so it can be as most helpful for you. So again, I realized early on I wasn't the target. I thought it was, like I said, I thought it was a decent movie. I don't know. I felt like the movie, the pacing was off and slow. And I don't know. And I was trying to figure this out throughout. And the best movie and the best scenario I could kind of use as a counterpoint or comparison, a point of comparison, and I thought it very early, and it lingered with me throughout the movie, is I feel about David F. Sandberg. I don't know, was it his direction? He does horror, so certain aspects of the movie, I felt like the special effects were pretty solid. I felt like he does horror. He did a great job with the seven sins. They all looked very unique, and they had a little scary kind of appeal to them. Not anything too crazy over the top. But I felt like he fit with those aspects of the movie, but pacing was off. I'm not gonna lie, y'all. And I hate to admit this, I like dozed off at one part. Like I was really waiting for the story to kind of shift and kick into that second gear, going from like the first act into the second, like flowing through. And it just like for me was grinding to a halt. And I literally, my wife like nudged me and was like, yo, you just dozed off. You're snoring. I can't remember the last time I dozed off watching a movie. Like legit, I was waiting for something to happen, and I was just like, the movie just kept feeling like it was meandering, I think is the word. And it was like I was just waiting, like, okay, something have to happen. You know, it was like, no, it didn't. I mean, it eventually did, but yeah, I nodded off for like a couple of minutes, and she was like, babe, you're snoring. And like and I'm like, oh, wow, like, really? It was crazy. But I know this might turn, like, I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just giving you the real. I'm being 100% real, and that's what I do with you guys. I share my real, authentic thoughts. And I just grew more and more disappointed at, as the movie went on till we got to the third act. And then I think things kind of stabled out a little bit for me. And like I said, so I felt like what people, like what Peyton Reed, I thought Ant-Man was I thought the first Ant-Man was good, but then like Ant-Man and the Wasp, I thought kind of was a dive down to a similar situation that I'm feeling about this movie, where I felt like it had so much potential, so many good things were done. I felt like Zachary Levi's performance was fun and entertaining. I think Mark Strong, I feel like them two alone really salvaged the movie, and Yamin Hansu as well. I felt like in his scenes in the movie, he really added something to it. I just never connected with the kids, the main two, especially Freddie and Billy. Here's the thing, and I felt like it was insulting, and just coming off the whole episode I did about defining a comics fan, I felt like, especially with Freddie Freeman's character, I felt like that was someone that wasn't a comic fan's stereotype of what a comic fan would be. Annoying, overbearing. All he would want to do is talk about comics. Even when people didn't ask him about comics, he would always over-insert and just, super high energy and, all that kind of stuff. And he just, Jack Dylan Grazer, and I've seen him, I saw a few interviews leading up this past week, going in to see the movie this past weekend, and it's just how he is, so he really wasn't acting. Add the comic book references and so forth and power references, but he's just like a super high energy kid. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it didn't appeal to me, and I thought it was a kind of a negative stereotype projected by people that aren't comics fans take on what a comic book fan is. And I didn't appreciate it, and I kind of took it personal. I don't know why, but I did. Maybe because I just had that thought and had that whole conversation or that discussion with you guys, and it made me feel a certain kind of way, because I was like, man, this is just what we were talking about. And I said, this is Hollywood's definition of what they think we are. And we're working so hard as a community and what we talk about and do here to break that stereotype and make it more, being a comic fan, more acceptable to the wider masses, not alienate or make people think that we're annoying people. So that bothered me for that reason of that conversation. And again, I don't know if it's the script's fault, the pacing, or just the editing by the director. It could be one of those three things. But like I said, the pacing, I felt like it was a bunch of nothing. It was like the beginning and the end, and in the middle, it was a bunch of nothing. They did a great job, like world building. I like how they kind of fleshed out Savannah. They really did a good job with the Rock of Eternity and the Wizard. And he, that he was the last. His brothers had been taken out. They even kind of talked about kind of Black Adam in a projection, kind of in a exposition sequence. Because you got to do exposition dumps in movies like this. That was kind of cool. So great world. Like I said, that's what I said. The character development, was good. The hints of what they set up in the world and all the Easter eggs were phenomenal. Like, I love the little Easter egg of Mr. Mind. And one thing I had read, like, going into this, I had read Shazam and the Monster Society of Evil. I had just read that a couple of weeks ago. So I was aware of Mr. Mind. I didn't know if he was going to be in the movie. And I saw when the beginning of the movie with Savant went into the Rock of Eternity, that we saw the glass case, and I saw Mr. Mind, and I was like, oh, no, they're not. And then that one of the end credit scenes, he full blown, like we saw later in the movie when they went back, that the case had been broken and that Mr. Mind had escaped. And then we see him pop up at the very end in prison when Savannah's in his cell and he's talking to him. And I thought that was cool. Now, I've heard from others that have seen the movie, that a lot verbatim was taken out of the new series that just launched, that Jeff Johns and Gary Frank are doing. No, Gail Englisham is doing. Him and Gary Frank did the other series, the Shazam Origin 1 trade. They did that. That was backups in the Justice League book. This, I think the new one is Jeff Johns and Dale Englisham. But it's only 4 issues in, and a lot of what I'm hearing is like literally like verbatim, the story of the movie was pulled from those first 4 issues. So if you want point of reference, it's like a lot of people are saying that. I haven't picked them up because I was waiting for the trade to go on sale and I can get it cheap to read it. But that the only difference is in the story in those first 4 issues is Black Adam, and they swapped him out with Savannah. So that's neither here nor there, but I thought that was kind of interesting. But like I said, it's definitely some things there. I don't know what it was. Like I said, that was my problem, what I was saying earlier about Jack Dylan Grazer's take on Freddie Freeman. I think Billy Batson, Asher Angel, he just was... he lacked charisma, I think is the best way. He was overly serious because you wanted to find a match for Zachary Levi, and I don't think in any shape, form, or fashion he was a good match for how we saw Zachary Levi as Shazam act to how he act. They were like 2 totally different characters. Where it's supposed to be, it's just the fantasy side of being a kid in a grown up's body, and it just, the 2 didn't match well at all. And I was never a huge fan. I liked when Asher wasn't on screen because he just didn't seem for a match. And now the take of Billy in them, and the one thing that I recently read that was connected to the history of Shazam is, again, Shazam and the Monster Society of Evil. Billy's a little bit younger. He's only like 8 or 10 years old or something like that. And they made sure Jeff Smith drew him really small. He was homeless. He wasn't a foster kid. He was like living in an abandoned building, and it was a little bit more darker of a take. And people kept saying how like this movie's kind of dark, so be careful if you take little kids. And I do agree. I feel like certain movies that they reference, people's like, well, like if you ever saw Gremlins or like Jurassic Park, it's kind of pushing that PG-13 envelope. I guess I was never. Like, they have some good, jump scares in there. I didn't jump. I mean, it was I think a lot of people, and this is the biggest thing, and this is the biggest thing I want you to take away from this or any review I do. Everyone is entitled to their own opinions. It doesn't make if they differ from yours that they're right or wrong. It's just another person's opinion, and you just kind of respect it. You can agree to disagree. All the buildup and all the different, so much positive stuff that I heard that was thrown out about the movie. Again, I don't have any animosity or hate or anything like that towards the movie. I just think how it was built up and how people talked about it, it didn't hit those notes for me on any level. Now, with everything being said, if they did a sequel to Shazam, would I go to the movies and see it? I would. I think enough good things were set up in this film that I would go see it again. Will I buy this when this comes out on home video and add to my movie collection and rewatch this movie? Yes, because I think the parts that were funny, I laughed quite a bit in this movie. For all the slow parts and all the other stuff, again, it was good nuggets sprinkled throughout the movie. It's not a perfect movie, and it's no such thing as a perfect anything. So I lean heavy on that. But was it entertaining? Mostly. Did I enjoy it? Mostly. The question that I feel like that sits with me, and this is the same thing I felt after I came out of Ant-Man and Wasp. Does a director change need to happen? I think David F. Sandberg is still early in his career. I feel personally, as I sat and I've thought about it over the past couple of days, is that I don't necessarily think David F. Sandberg is the problem. I think the script needed to be better, and it needed to be more for him to work within the confines of the script that needed to be more fleshed out and developed for him to work with. So I feel like I could tolerate it, give him one more chance. And I would like to see what he did, because with the creatures and the Shazam world, from what I'm seeing and the things that I'm hearing, is that it's rich with these kind of creatures and monsters and things like that. And those elements that were incorporated into this first movie, I felt were done extremely well. And that's kind of his niche. So for that, I would want to see him do at least one more film before I would bury him. But again, I wasn't similar to how I felt about Peyton Reed. Is I feel like his directing is solid, but it's not outstanding or even impressive yet. But it's solid. He can make a solid movie. I think this movie's going to make good money. Will it make some of the projections people had for it? I don't think so. I think this will kind of fall into that realm of excuse me, of it's not going to be $1 billion movie, I don't think, by any stretch of the imagination. I think it will be like for Marvel, like an Ant-Man, Doctor Strange, it's a 600, maybe 750 tops if it gets. But I already saw the box office for this first weekend. I don't know if I would say 750. I might say 650 to 675, global box office, which is decent, because I think they said the budget for this movie was right around $100 million. So if they spend $100 million and they make that much, before you throw in marketing in there, I think that's a win for DC Films, that they're recovering extremely well. I think they got a niche as a family movie. I think this is definitely a family friendly movie that you can take the whole family to, and they would enjoy it, from the adults to the kids, with variations on the level of enjoyment that's had when you get to the adults and the more middle-aged individuals in the family. I think this is more for your preteen, teen to preteens. It's aimed and focused for that demographic more so. So I think they would get more out of the movie than, say, some older adult. But I think it's a solid effort. I think DC Films are trending in a positive direction, coming after, the debacle that was Justice League. You have, Aquaman. Now you have, this. We're going into what I think the next movie is going to be Wonder Woman 1984. Is going to be their next movie down the road, and then it kind of opens up from there. So it's going to be interesting. Oh, well, no, excuse me, Joker. Joker's the next one slated for October, which that trailer just dropped. So they're trending up for and which is good, because for a while we thought they had already buried themselves with all the upheaval and all this stuff that was going on in the background at DC Films. It seems like they've kind of gotten themselves off on track, and they have a definitive direction on how they're going to handle these movies, as each character is their own distinctive situation, have its own tone, and build its own world. And then you can build it in such a way, because they really do, with the references and Easter eggs that they throw in, that it's, even though it's its own separate thing, it is still connected by little, the things, the appearance of Superman at the end of the movie, the references to Batman and the Batarang and all those different things, that is still in that same world, which I dig. I still, and one of my favorite parts too, which is I'm really looking forward to a sequel, is the whole situation of towards the end of the movie in the third act when Billy gives his powers to his siblings, and we have the Shazam family. I don't even know what you would call them, but the Marvel family or just Shazam family of Shazams. I don't know what they're called in the comics now, since they can't use the Captain Marvel name. But that part was cool, and I like that. I want to see more of that in the sequel and that fleshed out more. What was originally announced years and years ago, because The Rock was announced to be Black Adam, like cast as Black Adam. Now, what was originally announced at first he was going to be the villain in the Shazam movie. Then that changed because it was The Rock, and they said they were going to do a Shazam movie. Then they were going to do a Black Adam movie. Now, they referenced Black Adam in a flashback scene, and they used like a magical projection to kind of show, and it kind of resembled The Rock or whatever. So I don't know if that's still going to happen. That is still because it was a whole contract situation, because they did show Superman, but his head was cut off. You just saw him from the neck down. The reason that was being is that DC has not wanted to renew Henry Cavill's contract, and in his contract he's demanding that he wants a proper Man of Steel sequel. The movie was successful. They've made him do all these other appearances in these other movies and team up movies like Justice League and Batman v Superman, when he was originally supposed to have been given a sequel. They haven't come to terms on that agreement as of yet, so he didn't appear in the movie, so they worked around it. And I thought that Dwayne Johnson was supposed to be a part of the movie too. Maybe that was going to be a straight on flashback sequence instead of like a projection type thing showing him. And they worked around it. But where it's all intertwined is Henry Cavill has recently signed. He's become really good friends with The Rock, and The Rock's ex-wife, which is his production partner, which Rock isn't, or Dwayne is a executive producer, and she's executive producer on Shazam, if you see the credits, and that she manages Henry Cavill. And so that's why she was pushing for more, and I think they were trying to use leverage to make sure Cavill was taken care of, and that necessarily hasn't worked out to that point yet. So it remains to be seen, and nothing has been said on where, everything stands with the Black Adam movie, or will they just have him in a Shazam sequel? I feel like it would be less likely that, if anything, it would be a cameo in a Shazam sequel, because they've already firmly said Savant is not dead, and they did the end credit sequence where Mr. Mime is appearing, and they set that up. So I feel like the next Shazam movie, if we get one, would be focused on Savannah and Mr. Mime teaming up against the Shazam, the Marvel family, or the family of Shazam in a sequel. And I kind of dig that. I think Mr. Mime is like, it's because he's a little worm and he's this mastermind and this manipulator. Like, the concept of him that I got from Shazam and the Monster Society of Evil is like, that would be so cool to see on the big screen, and how they've already set him up. I'm like all in to see that in the sequel. So I don't necessarily feel like I need Black Adam there. So maybe, it remains to be seen how they're going to handle that. But I guess everything ultimately depends on how how much money this movie makes ultimately, if they feel comfortable with greenlighting a sequel and moving forward with doing the Black Adam movie. Because, he was announced in that role 5-6 years ago at this point now? It's been a while that he was first announced and all this stuff was said. And as far as what we knew, they tentatively said David F. Sandberg was going to direct both films. So again, I guess we'll find out something soon about what we might have in the future with this franchise coming out of this movie. Now, as always, I give you guys my rating of the movie. I grade 5 areas of for criteria that I base my numeric score on. I look at acting on a 10-point scale, casting, direction, special effects, story, and I average all that together to give you my overall numerical score or grade for the movie. Acting, I gave a 7 out of 10. Casting, a 6 out of 10. Like I said, when it came to Jack Dylan Grazer and Asher Angel, they just didn't work for me, and they're such a huge part of the movie where that casting part brought it down for me. I gave the direction a 5 out of 10. Again, I feel like David F. Sandberg was really great and strong in some areas, and other areas, like I said, with pacing and things of that nature, I felt like he totally failed on those. Special effects, I gave it 8 out of 10, and the story, I gave a 6 out of 10, giving it a overall score of a 6.5 out of 10. Like I said, it's a decent movie. Again, one I will add to my collection. I feel like it's a solid entry to the DC Films overarching movie franchises. Like I said, I'm all for a sequel to this movie and hope that they tighten up the script. I feel like as far as the casting, those actors are still young, and they can fine tune, I think, the certain things that I felt like were lacking in those characters in this first movie. You can improve in a sequel. And I love the casting they did with the rest of the siblings in their adult forms. They were so spot on. And I just want to see more of that going forward. So like I said, the foundation is there for them to really do a lot better. And I think this movie is going to do well. Like I said, I don't think it's going to be a flop or anything like that. I think now, again, especially coming off a movie like Captain Marvel that hit the $1 billion club, which was a movie I think everyone thought going into it wouldn't be that successful. Was that successful? So I think everybody's looking for the next sleeper $1 billion hit. I don't think it's it. I don't think this movie is it, but I think it's a solid entry that they can build off of. As long as they keep the budget in check, they know what this franchise is, and that they can slowly increase. But I think if they overreach and go from $100,000 to $200,000 budget, and then they clock the same returns, it's gonna start looking like a potential flop. So I feel like progressing with this series, the business side of it, because I want to see more of these stories, they have to keep the budget in relation to the overall expectation and the fan response they get from this movie, and don't go too crazy. They have something good if handled properly. Even if they increase the budget from $100 million to maybe $125 and expand the story out a little bit more, they could reap a little bit more returns from it, and then we might be talking maybe a $750 million to $800 million type release, which I still think is solid if you're trying, because it's about making money as well as entertaining us as comic fans. So I feel like if they keep the expectations geared in the right place, they can have they could do a very good trilogy of movies, and I feel like all three, especially with the demographic that they're targeting, and they can these characters are at the right age, they can grow with that target audience, that they could make, flip these movies quick over the next, 4 to 5 years and do 2 more movies, and all 3 would be relatively successful. So I think if they're smart, they'll do that. But time will tell. But that's all I really have for you guys in this episode. I appreciate you guys for listening. Also, if you haven't already, definitely check out the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Comic Book Savant. The membership, the subscribership is growing over there. We're closing in on 300. My hope is to reach 1,000 by the end of this year. So if you do listen to the podcast and you haven't checked out the YouTube channel, do that. It's exclusive content there. Also, if you haven't already, consider becoming a Patreon. You can sign up at patreon.com/Comic Book Savant. I have for your support of the show, I have different tiers. It's 4 or 5 different tiers. The most expensive tier is $7 a month. I have all type of exclusives you can get for becoming a Patreon, even at the lowest amount of $1 to the highest tier of $7. You get the exclusive. You get the Comic Book Savant Extra podcast that I do another whole weekly podcast that I do on the Patreon. Is also special discounts. There's all bells and whistles. You can go over to patreon.com/Comic Book Savant and see everything. At some point, I'm going to do an episode breaking down the whole Patreon campaign and how it works. But again, if you appreciate what I do, and you can, again, for as little as $1, you can become a Patreon and help support the show. Everything that you do and support goes into the show, helps me go to these movies, conventions, upgrading equipment, all the little bells and whistles that go into making a podcast. I use the money I get there to keep the show going, essentially. So anything you can do is help. Anything you do in those lines is very, very much appreciated. And I appreciate the Patreon support I've gotten so far. They've been a wonderful group. I love interacting with them. And I want to interact with you guys more. So definitely, like, I have the Facebook group set up. Just go over to Facebook and just do a search for Comic Book Savant discussion group, and just request to join the group. As soon as I see your request, I will add you onto the group. We just talk about comic book stuff. I throw out ideas that I want to do for upcoming episodes. It's just a way for me to interact with you guys one-on-one and make you even more a part of the show, because I feel like this is a collaborative process. It's not just me putting out stuff. I want to know what you guys want to hear me talk about and hear my thoughts on, and I will try my best to bring it to you as quickly as possible. And it just builds a great community. I think that's very important. I think we've been doing such a good job. I'm hearing, and sometimes it's like, I hate this part of doing the, podcast, but it's like, it's meaningful because I want to hear from you guys. Hearing from you guys is what motivates me, what fuels me to keep this going and learning where to go with the content. And I appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to this part, because I know you do, because I start getting more emails. I start getting more requests to the groups. I start seeing more subscribers to the YouTube channel. So sometimes it's my as a content creator, I'm not a salesperson, but these call to actions help so much in us interacting with each other to make this the best show possible. So if you have a moment, do those things. If you don't feel comfortable with doing any of those things, you can still do other stuff, retweeting my tweets or sharing or liking my Instagram post. If you have a moment, if you can go over to iTunes and leave a podcast review, I appreciate that. All those things help elevate the show and help get more eyes on the show. And I need your guys' help to do that, to keep it growing in a positive direction. With all that being said, I'm going to get out of your ear holes. That's all I have for you guys for this episode. I'll be back next week with another episode of Comic Book Savant. And I'll see you guys next time. You guys take care, and I will talk to you soon.